guy in the NBA should ever wear 23.
I've been working on that shot my whole life, and for that one to go in, that was liberating right there, man.
And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I honestly do. But we talking about
23 Shots of JD podcast.
Hey guys, welcome back to the 23 Shots of JD's new series. Oh, well, at this point it's not really new because it's towards the tail end of the mini-series, but if you're just tuning into this episode today, just basically 30 and 10 was where I broke down 30 teams in the NBA 10 days before the NBA season. And if you haven't checked out the previous episodes, there's a bunch of other teams that are broken down, and it's probably a really good likelihood that I broke down a team that you support or you follow in previous episodes. So definitely check that out. On top of that, I was able to get a great guest on episode 2. In Craig from Razzball.com, and in addition to breaking down some teams, we're able to also talk about sort of the state of UK basketball, sort of why, there's not really any bona fide stars from around like England or, Scotland, Ireland, countries like that, or in addition, we did talk about sort of collegiate basketball as well, because that's sort of more his specialty area. But besides that, I'll probably just try and get straight into it. We'll start. The first thing we'll probably break down is the Oklahoma City Thunder, OKC Thunder, and what? I guess what? How can you really explain what happened last season? It was sort of a really odd and really interesting season. Obviously they had two big trades that they did. Obviously, obtaining Paul George from the Indiana Pacers in exchange for Domantas Sabonis and Victor Oladipo. Which on face value alone, and especially when the trade initially happened, it felt that Oklahoma got an absolute steal. They really, swifted the Indiana Pacers into, this deal, which, if you looked up based on the stats of previous years and, all that stuff, it sort of just looked like it was a mediocre trade for the Pacers. But as I sort of mentioned in the Indiana Pacers breakdown, that was really far from the truth. But yep, they were able to get Paul George 13, who, voiced his voice for multiple years, his want and his desire to go and play for the Lakers or play in LA, nonetheless. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, despite hearing all these rumors that he might be going to the Lakers or the Clippers and teams like that, they still took a fly on him. And sort of as we get to, perhaps that might have been one of the best choices they made. But in addition to that, they did do another big trade in obtaining Carmelo Anthony. And at that time, I think the relationship between Carmelo Anthony and the New York Knicks was fractured. I think it was sort of the end of the road. He was sort of reaching a time in his career where he wasn't really suited to being the bona fide superstar, the go-to guy. And I think that's sort of just merely because of age and, sort of his athletic ability declining as well. So I think it was appropriate, and it was a mutual respect between both the New York Knicks and the Oklahoma City Thunder to trade Carmelo Anthony. And he goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then coupled with that with Russell Westbrook, here becomes a new super team in the Western Conference, Another big three, perhaps you could say. And, before the season started, there was a lot of hype and a lot of excitement around the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think probably... maybe not a lot of hype, but I think it's just a polarizing amount of attention towards the Oklahoma City Thunder because, people were sort of conflicted. Are they a top 3, top 2 team? Are they going to be competing against the likes of the Golden State Warriors or the Houston Rockets? Or are they going to sort of have this chemistry issue, especially, with Melo, PG, and Russell Westbrook all wanting to be dominant players? Are they going to be able to share the ball around effectively, and, how that's going to work out throughout the season, which... sort of as we get to, will be explained later. But I think what Oklahoma City fans were expecting, and even NBA fans in general, I think with the team, the caliber of experience, and sort of coupled with the sort of, I guess you could say, coaching expertise of, I feel bad for forgetting the coach's name, but the coach from Florida. I think there was a a bit of excitement towards what they could achieve. And I think they were aiming for the Western Conference Finals. I think they wanted to be able to compete against perhaps the Golden State Warriors or the Houston Rockets. But as we sort of find out, it will change a lot. But in addition to that, I did want to give a great shout out. Although he didn't really play a lot of minutes and didn't really have a great impact as a rotation player, I just want to give a shout out to Terrence Ferguson. He played in the Australian Basketball League in NBL, and despite not having one of the best seasons, he was able to showcase that the NBL is the perfect place for young and upcoming players to try and excel outside the college experience. And I think Terrence Ferguson, even though he probably doesn't know it yet, he definitely sort of pioneered a type of movement where the NBL is going to become more of a breeding ground for future NBA players. We've seen people like Torrey Craig, Joe Ingles played in the NBL and stuff like that. James Ennis, as I mentioned in previous podcasts as well, and now Terrence Ferguson. I think sort of the caliber of players coming from the caliber of competition in the NBL is conducive to creating some great NBA players, and we're going to see that potentially with Bruce Bowen at the Sydney Kings, who obviously because of that whole Louisville scandal sort of had to branch outwards. But like I mentioned, just wanted to give a quick shout out to Terrence Ferguson because I think he's going to be a promising player for the Oklahoma City Thunder for the many years to come. And sort of with that athletic ability and his sort of prowess to shoot threes, I think he's going to be a really effective player coming. But I guess sort of reviewing overall the Oklahoma City Thunder's season last year, it was very much a disappointing season. I think there was even fear. It was sort of a lot of ebbs and flows. There were points where it's like, wow, this team's amazing. They're going to make the playoffs. Easily, they're going to be a top 4 contender. But then out of nowhere, it looked like they were even going to miss the playoffs. And that's what the feeling was just throughout the Western Conference, especially below second place. But yeah, as I mentioned, it was a disappointing season. They got knocked out in the first round of the playoffs. Just nothing really worked out for them as they sort of expected with this big three. And I think that the catalyst for that was the whole Melo experiment blowing up in their face. And I think Melo wasn't really suited to being a starter on the Oklahoma City Thunder. But, tell Melo that, he's going to laugh in your face because, there's an infamous interview he had where he goes, Melo doesn't start off the bench. But I think Carmelo Anthony was sort of not an anchor, but I think he was a liability to some degree on the Oklahoma City Thunder, especially defensively. And I think that sort of got exposed by teams that they sort of, got their scouting report a bit better. And then on top of that, in the playoffs when, all sort of expectations are hard. And so overall, I think they were expecting more out of their big three. But I think when you look at, logically, I think perhaps maybe the Melo PG-13 experiment was probably not going to work. And I think as well, Russ had to, develop and sort of relearn how to play with, with multiple stars. He had a whole season where he was the man that he could do anything. So I think it was maybe a bit of a learning curve for him to sort of become that type of player again where, he sort of played with KD and Serge and stuff like that. But, they tried to make some changes in the offseason. I guess one of the biggest ones they were able to do, as I sort of alluded to at the beginning, was re-signing Paul George, which just somehow happened. I think it was a big shock to the NBA world because everyone thought that, the lack of success that occurred with the Oklahoma City Thunder, they didn't really touch anywhere near the Western Conference playoffs. And then on top of that, with the rumors that LeBron James might be going to the Los Angeles Lakers, they have sort of 2 max spots for free agents. I think it was always lining up that Paul George is going to leave and go to the Lakers, Like, he verbally said quite evidently in past seasons that he wanted to, or he had a thrill or wanted to go home and play in his home city and stuff like that. So, when Paul George signed with the Oklahoma City Thunder, it was just, it was quite extraordinary. And it's sort of the circumstances that even arose from that were pretty insane. You signed at a party thrown by Russell Westbrook, had a lot of celebrities. He had Nas performing and stuff like that. So definitely, I think it showed to Paul George that it was really wanted and that he was needed for this team to be successful. And I think, for all the slack that Russell Westbrook gets for potentially not not sort of helping his teammates succeed and stuff, it seems pretty evident that Paul George is someone that likes winning and likes competitiveness, and I think that's what Russell Westbrook brings. And I think that's what Paul George sort of got attracted to as well. I think he also got attracted to having a bit more say in what the direction of the team is as well. I think sort of what type of players are going to sign, sort of what type of not coaching system, but what type of systems are going to implement within their game. I think there was a lot of things that Paul George sort of wanted, and I think Oklahoma City, realizing that they lost a superstar before in Kevin Durant, realized they might need to accommodate and be a bit more flexible. So, they signed Paul George 13, PG 13, which awesome nickname. I like how he changed his nickname. I like how he changed his jersey number just for a nickname. That's why you gotta respect Paul George. He's a smart man, smart businessman. But signed Paul George, and I think that solidifies sort of their two main guys for the upcoming years. I don't know how much gas these guys are gonna have, and the supporting cast is gonna surround them. It's gonna be interesting, but I think nonetheless you got two, in my opinion, bona fide. At least you got a superstar in Russell Westbrook and a star to superstar level talent in Paul George, and even though it seems that you might need to have multiple All-Stars on your team, I think having two players that are arguably top 20 and one that's arguably top 10 or if not top 5, I think is going to work wonders for the Oklahoma City Thunder team in the next coming years, especially coming off that whole Kevin Durant situation. I think a lot of people sort of just wanted to write off the Thunder and that they were gonna sort of go into abyss with just Russell Westbrook putting up monster stats but not really making playoff success really happen. But shout out to Sam Hinkie and the Thunder organization for being able to sort of get Paul George. In addition, they signed Nerlens Noel from the as a free agent. So he was from the Dallas Mavericks. Didn't really get much game time. Sort of what he basically what he was sort of done for all season was stealing the hot dogs from the media room in his pocket. Weird. But people sort of forget that Nerlens Noel was actually a really solid player coming out of Kentucky. If he didn't get injured, he would be sort of the number 1 pick. I think there was sort of a lot of things sort of disadvantage in Noel's way. He was sort of a means to an end in Philadelphia because they knew you're not going to be playing when Joel Embiid and stuff gets healthy. So sort of an unfortunate journey, sort of a similar journey to Jahlil Okafor that Nerlens Noel has experienced. But I think he's going to have a bounce back sort of year, and he's going to be an important piece for the Oklahoma City Thunder because Nerlens Noel, despite not maybe having a perimeter game, sort of has that Clint Capella, DeAndre Jordan type game. He could screen and roll, finish around the rim, athletic defender. I think he can have a sort of great, meaningful impact for the team for the Oklahoma City Thunder, especially at the center position where they might seem a bit sort of light or trim, So especially it's with Steven Adams as well. I think it will be perfect to it'll be sort of like a nice supplementary piece to Steven Adams as well. But in addition, they re-signed Jeremy Grant, who I believe is a really, really decent player. He showed that with Oklahoma last year, playing at the sort of power forward position. He was able to provide that new age power forward type game, stretch the floor, shoot threes, be athletic, put the ball on the floor and stuff like that. So I think he was an important piece to pick up again, and again, someone that's familiar with the system, so that when they run back the team, which they sort of look like they're doing, and have really a similar core group of guys, when they run back the team is going to be sort of business as usual for them, I guess. But I think the biggest displacement on the team is obviously them trading Melo. If they kept Melo, they would have paid basically $300 million on their books, which is a ridiculous amount of lottery tax. Now they're able to cut down the lottery tax amount and pay an amount that's more realistic and more wantable. But obviously they traded Melo, and I think that sort of puts Melo in a bit of a beast. I think, as I mentioned in the Rockets episode, I think Melo might want to be proving himself. But again, is he going to be able to coexist and have that sort of ego check to himself where he's going to be I'm going to play off the bench. I think I'm going to be more effective off the bench. Sort of like one of his mates in Dwayne Wade, who realized that perhaps he's not a starting caliber player anymore, but he can still have a meaningful role on the team, provide that experience in the young players. Just from the bench though, so I will definitely see that. But I think them trading Melo was I think sort of a obvious thing that was going to happen in the offseason. So, what should we expect from them this season? It seems a bit weird to sort of say that because it looks like they have the exact same team, barring Melo, and I guess adding Nolan as well. But in some circumstances, people have them improving. I think having only two bona fide superstars shows cases that maybe there's going to be less delineation, sort of like a there's going to be a less amount of sort of diminishment of return. That now they have two key guards that know their role. They're going to focus on their role and have a bunch of supplementary rotation pieces that know their role as well. So it seems that a lot of people expect them to improve. I think they'll improve as well. I think last season, was just a situation where a lot of people needed to adjust. Paul George needed to adjust playing with another superstar. Melo needed to adjust not being the superstar, and Russell Westbrook as well needed to adjust not being so ball dominant. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, I think Russell Westbrook might be missing the start of the season with the whole knee surgery, but I think when he'll come back, I think he'll help the team improve from last year and be a bit more competitive in the postseason as well. I think we're going to see them excel a bit better against sort of postseason oppositions, and I think there's a lot of potential for them. I do have them highly. I think the important thing as well is to think and view throughout the season is this sort of question: is this a long-term team? It's the Oklahoma City Thunder, how they built the team with George and Russell on really big contracts. Is this sort of the team that's going to lead Oklahoma City to the prosperity that they once nearly reached back in 2012 with KD, Russ, Harden, and Ibaka and stuff like that? So it'll be interesting to see. And some people even have them finals bands being better than the Rockets. I feel like it was the addition by subtraction. With what Oklahoma City Thunder was able to do with Melo. So some people even think that they could be a top 3, top 4 team, which I think that's what they should be aiming for. But I'm not sure where they're going to lie. I think they'll be anywhere between 3 to 6, which is probably sort of about the same of what happened last year. But I think just wins-wise will probably improve. So I think overall the Thunder are going to slightly improve, but I don't think they're going to be as competitive as other people think. But I guess moving to another team in the West that's sort of going to be one of those teams fighting for a playoff spot, you could say, is the New Orleans Pelicans. I sort of changed the way I say New Orleans as well, because I used to say New Orleans, but I guess, that's not how you meant to pronounce it. It's New Orleans. So shout out to the New Orleans Pelicans. Review of last year, they basically was running back sort of the same team, and they get to have I guess what people thought was going to be a full season with their new Twin Towers and DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis. Obviously Boogie came to the Pelicans halfway through last season, in that funny infamous All-Star trade, I guess you could say, where he sort of found out while doing a media scrum, which is, that's probably not the best way to find out. But the people thought he had a full train. These guys had a full training camp, full preseason, stuff like that. So it seemed that they're gonna be more primed than Boogie, arguably the best center in the game, and AD, arguably the best power forward, or even at times the best center in the game as well. So you really have the two best big men in the game, and I think people thought there was gonna be a lot of damage made by the Pelicans. I think people also thought they could have been the kryptonite to a lot of other teams, because whilst a lot of other teams were trying to build outwards, with guards, I think the Pelicans were trying to build inwards and outwards with big guys. People forget that AD can stretch the floor effectively, and DeMarcus Cousins can shoot the three at a high clip, and both can be playmakers on the ball as well. So I think you just have two unique big men that could have been sort of a dynamic duo if things progressed as it was, as we'll get to, sort of didn't really materialize. But in addition, they signed Drew Holiday on a really, really big contract. A lot of people were skeptical about the contract, and if you sort of watch the regular season as well, it sort of wasn't ill advised to think that. I think Drew Holiday hasn't really proved much. He made one All-Star appearance with the Philadelphia 76ers, but sort of besides that, he's had his own injury woes. He's had that unfortunate situation with his wife as well. So Drew Holiday, a really, really good guy, and it's always good to see someone like him who's really honest and really nice and really kind, trying to get his money. But I think just looking at pure basketball sense, I think there was some skepticism arising in regards to if Drew Holiday was truly the point guy to lead them. And because of that skepticism, I think the Pelicans picked up Rajon Rondo, a guy that has that championship experience, has that playoff experience. There's no led a team before in the Celtics. When Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen left, so Rondo definitely had that sort of resume that allows him to demand a lot of leadership and a lot of respect from the playing group. And I think they brought him in to not only help Drew Holiday develop as a point guard, but even play coinciding with Drew Holiday. I think, as we saw in the playoffs, that Drew Holiday and Rondo playing as those two guard positions was really effective. So, we sort of saw the rise of Rondo and him sort of rebuilding back his reputation, because I think his reputation was scarred ever since that sort of Dallas Mavericks situation, where he allegedly quit on the team and stuff like that. And I think Rondo was able to build up his aura again with the Pelicans, and that sort of subsequently led to him, getting another contract at a different team, which we'll mention probably tomorrow, which I guess is pretty obvious who we're going to mention, but sort of overall, I think they exceeded expectations. I think it should be noted that their expectations shifted because, obviously, DeMarcus Cousins had that really horrific Achilles injury, which put him out for the rest of the season. So it sort of was just an AD and Drew Holiday team, and you could sort of chuck in Rondo. I guess you could sort of say that that's not a big three, but sort of their power three. And I think people were skeptical again. They're like, geez, the West is too competitive. There's so many big name players, a big name team, that just on looking at the roster is a lot better than the Pelicans. So, their expectations shifted, and in regards to that, they exceeded it. They made the playoffs, probably not as high as they initially wanted. I think people thought they were going to be a top 4 team, but when you make the playoffs, anything can happen, and that's definitely what the Pelicans were able to do. Because as soon as they made it in the playoffs, playoff Rondo turned up, Drew Holiday went to prove that he was worth a big contract, and Anthony Davis proved that he was a bona fide superstar and a true MVP candidate. And, they were competitive in the playoffs without Boogie. They swept the Blazers in the first round. They showed some competitiveness towards the Golden State Warriors. And I think that showcased to everyone that, perhaps the Pelicans are actually good. Maybe we've sort of been underwriting or undervaluing the value and the potential of the Pelicans, and that, it's completely sort of shifted and changed people's minds. And as I sort of mentioned earlier, I think this was the arrival of AD being an MVP candidate. Despite his team probably not having the best record or not the best seeding in the playoffs, GMs definitely recognized that he stepped up his game. He took upon a massive workload with Boogie being out, and he sort of arrived as that core MVP candidate. He finished top 3 in voting, had a barnstorming run towards the MVP voting. And I think AD, as I mentioned, and I'll keep repeating, proved that he belongs in this conversation as one of the best players. I think everyone thought he had the best talent, but I think overall now everyone's like, wow, this guy is actually a freak, and he potentially is the best player in the NBA. And if you talk to Anthony Davis, he'll tell you he's the best player in the NBA. But obviously we'll sort of move on to what they did in the offseason. And it was more sort of what they lost in the offseason is what should be noted. DeMarcus Cousins, obviously coming off that Achilles injury, was primed for a big sort of extension or big contract. And I think with the Achilles injuries, a lot of teams, such that include the New Orleans Pelicans, were sort of skeptical to really give him that big contract that he might have been asking for. And I think because of that, DeMarcus Cousins realized that while he might not get a big contract, he might be able to go somewhere that might want him and be able to lead him to a championship. So, DeMarcus Cousins left. He left to the Warriors, and as we'll mention sort of next episode when we talk about the Warriors, how sort of that dynamic is going to play out. But in addition to that, they lost Rajon Rondo, which I think was an interesting thing. I'm surprised they let him go, because I thought Rajon Rondo, he averaged 10 and 12 in the postseason, and I think he was actually a really influential player. And I think he was one of those players that knew, just because his IQ is so high and his basketball sort of abilities is second to none. I think he just knew what AD wanted, where AD needed to get the ball, sort of the positions and angles where to feed it and stuff like that. So for them to sort of let go of Rondo, and especially on the contract that he ended up signing with the Lakers, I think they could have re-signed him, but I guess the Pelicans didn't value Rondo or didn't think Rondo was that worthy of getting re-signed. I think maybe his age and some other factors as well. They wanted to move on and try and bring in some other players, and they definitely brought in some other players, some young players, and some players that definitely need to prove themselves as well. One of which is Elfrid Payton, who obviously was the point guard for the Orlando Magic and then gets traded to the Phoenix Suns and then really doesn't see much game time with the Phoenix Suns. But ironically, Elfrid Payton was sort of viewed as sort of a Rondo type player coming out of the draft. He was long, very pass first type, defensive ace and stuff like that. So people with GM sort of recognize that Elfrid Payton could have been a Rondo type player, but obviously he goes back to his hometown where he played at Louisiana Lafayette. But I think if I don't know what they're gonna do. Is he gonna be the starting point guard and they play Drew Holiday at the 2, or is Elfrid Payton gonna be the sort of second guy off the bench, playing that sort of point guard, second unit minutes? So we'll see how they're going to integrate Elfrid Payton if he improves. He definitely realized that his hair was a massive burden towards him, so he cut his hair, which it looks weird. I'll be honest, it looks weird when he cut his hair because now he just looks like a regular dude. But for a guy that gets his shots blocked by his own hair, I think he should have cut his hair a long time ago. But I think definitely see Elfrid Payton to improve and develop and see him actually showcase sort of the potential that he sort of had coming into the draft when he got picked. But another guy that sort of, I guess, on the redeeming track is Jahlil Okafor. If you listen to the podcast, we've been massive fans. Myself and David were massive fans of Jahlil Okafor. Coming out of the draft, he was sort of viewed as potentially the number 1 pick. And, he sort of got shafted by the Philadelphia 76ers. They put him on ice. They didn't let him showcase his skills and abilities, because they were tanking and he was winning them too many games. Then he ended up traded to the Brooklyn Nets, and his relationship with the Brooklyn Nets doesn't really materialize as anything positive. So just sort of an unfortunate track for Jahlil Okafor that he's been on. But I think he's going to be a big player for the Pelicans, especially coming off that second unit. I think he's a technician in the post, so he's going to give you some post points. I think the biggest flaw he has is defensively, but if he can sort of go 1-on-1 with his center or his opposing player, I think obviously that's going to null and be 0, and at least his plus and minus will be 0 for himself. But see Jahlil Okafor to get some minutes and improve, and I'm definitely going to be closely watching the whole Jahlil Okafor journey this year, especially. But another player they signed, and I guess another Kentucky guy who's going to match. They lose one Kentucky guy, they gain another Kentucky guy, and that is Julius Randle. So Julius Randle, I think he's going to have an amazing season this year, and I think he's, depending on how it's going to work out, he could either be the most improved player or sixth man of the year. I think those 2 awards are definitely in play for Julius Randle. But talking about Julius Randle, he had a very, very good season, especially second half of the season with the Lakers. He sort of, I think, besides him not really having a perimeter game, a 3-point shot or whatnot, what he provides is this hustle mentality. He always works hard. He's going to grab the rebounds. He's ferocious in the paint. And not only that, he can actually handle the ball quite decently. He can put the ball on the floor and take these bigger guys out and try and drive into the lane and stuff like that. And, I think he's going to have a great impact for the New Orleans Pelicans, especially if he comes off the bench playing in that second unit with someone like Elfrid Payton and even Jahlil Okafor as well. You sort of have a great sort of 3 trio type of guys that are going to be effective in the rotation. So definitely, these players that they sign are not only going to be good, but I think going to be effective for the Pelicans. Yes, that sort of leads to what we should expect from the Pelicans this season. I think they're going to fight for the playoffs again. I think it's going to probably be a similar situation where they sort of just sneak into the playoffs around that 6th, 7th, or even 8th seed. But I think they'll make the playoffs, and if they do make the playoffs, I think a lot of that's going to be catalyzed through Anthony Davis. And if they could even make the top 4, I think that's going to be aiding in Anthony Davis's MVP journey. And I think, as I mentioned, it might have been last episode or 2 episodes ago when I talked about Giannis. I think people have similar feelings with Anthony Davis, where, you know, the story and on top of just the amount of just sheer production he produces is ridiculous, and he's someone that you have to note as a future or potential MVP candidate for this year and definitely the upcoming season. So definitely see AD not necessarily take a step up, but sort of prove to people that what he was able to do in the playoffs, he can sustain for a long period of time in the regular season. Just knock on wood that hopefully he stays healthy and stuff like that as well. But as I sort of alluded to with their sort of new signings in the offseason, we're going to see a sort of a redemption road for people like Elfrid Payton and Julius Randle and Jahlil Okafor. They're going to try and prove themselves and prove that they belong in the NBA as not only just a rotation player, but as an effective player. You know, what they were able to do, you know, with sort of Rondo changing his whole identity, even Drew Holiday being able to showcase why he was worth a big contract, Nikola Mirotic being able to showcase sort of his abilities and his value on the team. I think the Pelicans have a lot of space for people to try and showcase their skills and abilities, and I think that's going to materialize with, you know, with their new signings in Elfrid Payton, Julius Randle, and Jahlil Okafor. But I guess I'll move on to the last team we'll break down, and I think definitely the most interesting team in the West, because just sort of what they were able to do last season really took the conference by storm, and that is the Utah Jazz. So, you know, they were definitely the surprise team in the West, and I think they showcased that they were not only a surprise team, but a legitimate threat in the West. And I think when Gordon Hayward left and he went to the Celtics, people, pundits, just general NBA fans, writers, journalists, bloggers, everyone sort of wrote off the Jazz. They're like, you know what, they lost their superstar player who averaged 20 points per game. He was an all-star. How are they going to bounce back? And I think they bounced back well by picking one of the beasts in the draft. I think the steal of the draft, and that is Donovan Mitchell. They picked up Donovan Mitchell from Louisville, a two-way guard, which a lot of people, I remember listening to a lot of sort of podcasts and just videos and stuff about sort of potential smokies in the draft, and it could have been the Ringer. I'm not entirely sure. But there was a lot of people that were really, really high on Donovan Mitchell. But even the people that were high and thought that he was definitely a dark horse in the draft, definitely didn't expect the type of production that he produced. One of the rare rookies to produce 20 points per game, especially in the modern era. He was able to sort of lead the Utah Jazz to this insane season. And I think Donovan Mitchell proved that the guy's a beast. The guy sort of follows that new mold of a two-way guy that can do everything. He's just an all-round player. Defensively, he's super sound. Offensively, he can do anything he wants. He's just a really, really, really great player. Sort of follows that similar mold to a Victor Oladipo, where, you know, they're sort of undersized for the shooting guard position, but they're sort of perfect for the point guard position, but they're not really a true point guard. You know, they're sort of, again, those combo guards that just are super effective. Just super, super effective. So, yeah, just shout out to Donovan Mitchell. I think unlucky they didn't get Rookie of the Year, but I think, you know, nonetheless, I think people sort of recognize the season that he had, and he's only going to grow from there as well. But I guess look at the Utah Jazz as just a holistic team. They were solid and cohesive. They just knew how to play. Quinn Snyder, just an amazing coach. You know, I sort of call him the Brad Stevens of the West, because he's just able to plug in plays. People know their role, and they just know how to play effectively to it. I think defensively, again, I think they might have been the best defensive team, if not one of the best defensive teams in the season. Offensively, they were really, really sound, as I mentioned. And I think Quinn Snyder's system and his methodologies that he's implemented with the Utah Jazz has been really, really effective into creating this type of team that's just a solid team in the West. A solid team in the West that's always going to play hard and just have a bunch of rotation players that know their role. But you know, obviously they're the strong reason why they were sort of one of the best defensive teams in the West, and that's because they had the defensive player of the year in Rudy Gobert. Go Gadget, the guy who before Mo Bamba came into the league had had the largest wingspan recorded in the NBA, and the guy just knows how to defend. He's just so long. His spatial awareness is ridiculous. He covered a large amount of the paint, and you just know when you get into the paint, you're gonna have a really, really hard time in trying to score against Rudy Gobert. And despite maybe he doesn't bring a lot offensively, he doesn't shoot a three well. He's not really a perimeter guy. What he does well is defensively, and dude, he runs the paint. No, it's really, really hard to score on him in the paint. And when he specializes in something like that, despite him not really having an offensive game to him, Rudy Gobert nonetheless is just an overall a great player who can impact the game without even scoring, sort of like a Dennis Rodman type player. But just a review of last season. They made it to the top tier of the Western Conference. They came fourth. Yeah, they came fourth because the Trailblazers came third. They came fourth. They versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Knocked out the Oklahoma City Thunder and was relatively competitive with the Houston Rockets. I think it was a bit hard. Again, there was just so much expectation. Donovan Mitchell to just produce in the playoffs, which he definitely did. He produced way higher than Ben Simmons did. So if you're going to say a Rookie of the Year for the playoffs, it was definitely Donovan Mitchell. But I think they might have been disappointed with how they played against the Houston Rockets. But coming to this season with a 1 year older Donovan Mitchell, re-signing some great players and stuff like that as well. I think they're gonna be a force in the West to come. But changing the off season, they picked up Grayson Allen, who I think is gonna be a really solid pick. And I think a lot of these guys that stay 4 years in college are definitely undervalued because they just looked at too old. They might not be able to be developed properly. But Grayson Allen, sort of a polarizing collegiate player. Played 4 years at Duke, won a national championship in his first year. Had an amazing sophomore season where he scored over 20 points per game. But then, his third and fourth season was filled with just controversy and conjecture. There was players that were getting recruited that were better than him, and then, they should have started ahead of him. He was tripping players up and stuff like that. Just a lot of things were happening in Grayson Allen's career post his sophomore season, which is unfortunate. But he finally made it to the NBA as a first-round pick, a very solid pick, and I think he's again one of those combo guards that are gonna be effective. If you look at the Utah Jazz team, they just have an array of combo guards that are just gonna have an influential effect on the team as a whole. As we'll sort of get to who they re-signed and stuff like that. But overall, I think Grayson Allen, he's gonna have a decent amount of game time for the team. I don't know what his role is gonna be in the rotation because, like I mentioned, they have a lot of already experienced guys on the team. But nonetheless, see Grayson Allen to develop and have a pretty decent rookie campaign. So moving on. I think with the success of what happened with the Utah Jazz last season, I think the organization, and especially the GMs and stuff like that, recognize that maybe they should run back with the same team because this team is still relatively young. They re-signed Derek Favors, who is their starting power forward, on a pretty good contract. I remember back in the day there was rumors that that they wanted to trade him and stuff like that. So it's great to see that sort of the relationship has stayed. Had actually grown and become more healthy, and that Favors was in favor of signing with the Utah Jazz. And just a bit about Favors, a solid player. Not a needle mover for the Utah Jazz, but being similar with the system, understanding the role he needs to play. He's sort of the main go-to scorer when it comes to the front court as well. So definitely Favors is gonna get the same amount of touches that he usually gets. And what we sort of saw from him in the past couple of seasons, especially last season with sort of the improvement that he had, definitely expect that to happen this season as well. But in addition, they signed one of their other point guards in Raul Neto, a solid defensive point guard who sort of has some spot minutes here and there whenever sort of maybe Rubio needs a rest, or they're sort of just looking for a bit of variety as well. So Raul Neto gets signed, and they also re-signed one of the sort of the combo guys that I've mentioned that exists on the Utah Jazz in Dante Exum. So again, you got to shout out to the Aussie again. He was sort of has had an unfortunate runs of injuries and stuff like that, ACLs and stuff like that. So it's just unfortunate to see Dante Exum career not go as well or as planned as it should have been. But nonetheless, Dante Exum was able to prove, especially in the playoffs when he was guarding hard, and that his length and his defensive prowess is nothing to laugh at. And despite him being a really risky signing, especially for the length of the contract that the Utah Jazz gave him, go get your money, young bull, young Aussie, let's go. But obviously the length of the contract that the Utah Jazz gave him is something that a lot of people were skeptical about, and even myself, despite him being an Aussie player, I think just on face value, it's sort of, it is a bit risky, but his potential is paramount, and especially I think they might want to sort of move on from Rubio in the future, and with a backcourt with Donovan Mitchell and Dante Exum, you got a bunch of interchangeable guys that can both handle the ball, both drive to the lane, effectively score. Obviously, Mitchell's probably more of a bona fide scorer than Exum, but defensively, both really, really sound on the perimeter. So I think he's definitely worth the risk as one. People forget he was a top 5 player. At points, people compared him to Kobe Bryant when he was coming to the draft, which is obviously far from the truth. But, we got to see a full season from Dante Exum, and you'll see that this guy's legit. Dante Exum's a great player, so shout out to the Aussie. But I guess that sort of leads into what we should expect from the Utah Jazz this season. And even though there was a surprising team in the East, in the West, they proved to be a legitimate threat amongst playoff teams. I think you expect the Utah Jazz to take an even bigger step in the West. I think there's Western Conference Finals possibilities for this team. I think they are arguably the second best team in the West behind the Warriors. And if you look at the roster, yes, perhaps it hasn't changed, but I think with the Rockets adding Melo, they lost Trevor Ariza and Ryan Anderson. I think there's going to be some subtraction by addition with the Houston Rockets. Obviously, I don't think the Portland Trailblazers are going to be good as they were. Obviously, the Lakers are going to be better, but I think a lot of teams in the West are going to sort of stagnate at where they are. Maybe Oklahoma City Thunder as well going to improve, but I think the Utah Jazz have a real opportunity to solidify themselves as one of the cream of the crop type of teams in the Western Conference. And Western Conference Finals is definitely a possibility for them. They could sort of usurp the Spurs as one of those teams that are just fundamentally sound. Built through a great coaching staff led by Quinn Snyder. I think they definitely have a chance to showcase that they are one of the better teams in the West. And in addition, I think that's going to be built through them developing their young core. I sort of mentioned Donovan Mitchell still young. People forget Rudy Gobert still relatively young. Favors still young. Exum still young. You still have experience in Ricky Rubio. They have the other Aussie in Jingles, Joe Ingles. Shout out to the Aussies. Joe Ingles, a beast. People forget how old he is though. He's like 30, but a solid player, solid player, solid role player. Can shoot the three really effectively. One of the better 3-point shooters, actually, in the NBA. So probably hasn't done the 3-point contest, but I think his release is probably not the most sound. It's not. It's disgusting. His 3-point shot, his 3-point technique or shooting technique is just not that sexy. But it doesn't matter if it's not that sexy. If it's effective. It's not. It doesn't matter how sexy it looks. But again, develop the young core and definitely see Donovan Mitchell solidify himself as one of the top tier shooting guards, not only in the Western Conference, but in the whole of the NBA as well. And I think there's definitely also potential for Donovan Mitchell there's definitely also potential for Donovan Mitchell and even Rudy Gobert, I think, as well, especially, as I mentioned, if what I believe the Utah Jazz are, if they're going to be a top 2 team, especially even before the All-Star, expect someone to, someone like Quinn Snyder to even be coaching them. Even Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, as I mentioned, be all-stars as well. So definitely see the rise of Donovan Mitchell, man. He's going to take another big step forward, which is ridiculous to think, in regards to what he was able to produce last season. But yeah, definitely see Donovan Mitchell to take another big step. And as they keep mentioning, Utah Jazz, if they're going to be successful, is going to be built through sort of them being a defensive juggernaut. I don't think people are going to be effectively scoring on them. They just work hard, and there's really no egos on the team. Maybe you could say Donovan Mitchell with his whole media run. Like, the guy was like on every single media outlet throughout the playoffs, and you're like, mate, what are you doing? Not even in the playoffs. Like, he was really on a bit of a media run, trying to showcase everything. You know, he had the whole campaign with Adidas and stuff like that. So, he's definitely trying to prove that he's a superstar, not only talent, but a superstar in regards to the sort of pop culture and stuff like that. But, so again, they're going to be a defensive juggernaut, and, coupled with that with great coaching, the Utah Jazz are going to be a force to reckon with. And if I was going to give a pure prediction, I think the Utah Jazz are going to be the number 2 team in the Western Conference, and I think they're going to make the Western Conference Finals. So, yeah. Oh God, yeah. I swear every time I did a podcast, I'm a bit sick, but thanks you guys for listening. Obviously, if you've been listening for a long time, you know how to contact me or reach me, which a lot of you guys have, which I'm really thankful for, and obviously like to try and interact with my audience, because you are the guys that I sort of do it for. So if you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter at 23shotsofjd. Obviously, if you don't have Twitter or don't use Twitter or don't like Twitter, you can email me at 23shotsofjd@gmail.com. Any question, queries, maybe advice, anything like that you want, I can reach you. You can reach me sort of through those platforms as well. As I mentioned at the start, I broke down a bunch of other teams. 24 other teams I've already broken down before this episode. So if your team hasn't been mentioned in this episode, there's a very strong likelihood that they've been mentioned, in previous episodes as well. So definitely check that out. If there's one episode to check out, as I mentioned, check out the Craig from Razzball.com one. I think it was a really intriguing conversation, especially from sort of two people, myself from Australia and him from the UK, sort of talking about basketball as it pertains to, sort of countries outside sort of the mainstream America and even the European countries as well. So definitely check that out as well. But tomorrow will be the last episode for the 30-10 series. Obviously, be one day before the NBA season, which obviously I'm hyped up and excited for. So you might as well try and catch up with all the episodes. So when you're coming into the season, you got to be primed and ready, and you know that Jordan, you're completely correct about all the teams. So besides that, I'll sort of go. Bye.